It started on a Friday, a normal, boring Friday, the kind where you're counting the hours until lunch. But at 8:31 a.m., something small, something silent, something utterly catastrophic slipped into the bloodstream of the world. By noon, doctors couldn't access patient files. Ambulances were being rerouted. Chemotherapy schedules vanished. Banks quietly went offline. Shipping ports stalled. And computers from London to Lagos to Los Angeles were lighting up with the same message. Pay $300 in Bitcoin or lose everything. And that's when people realized this wasn't a glitch. It wasn't an accident. It was an attack. But the most terrifying part? This attack didn't target one country, one company, or one government. It targeted everyone. In the span of hours, 230,000 computers across 150 countries were locked, hijacked, and held hostage. Hospitals, universities, factories, telecom giants, small businesses, government agencies, even police departments. WannaCry swept through networks like a digital wildfire, and no one knew how to put it out. At Britain's National Health Service, chaos erupted instantly. Doctors arrived for the morning shift and found every machine frozen. Surgeons preparing for operations couldn't access medical records. Patients were turned away from emergency rooms. Some hospitals ordered ambulances to stop coming entirely. Imagine that. A ransomware attack so powerful it shut down real-world hospitals. And in that first hour, as fear spread faster than the virus, the question no one could answer was, who would do this? A criminal gang? A rogue hacker? A prankster who went too far? Or something far darker? Because buried inside WannaCry, hidden deep in its code, investigators would soon find something chilling. A weapon. An American weapon, built by the NSA, stolen, leaked, and unleashed by a foreign adversary. But on that Friday morning, no one knew any of that yet. All they knew was the world had been hit, and hit hard. At St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London, a nurse approached a patient awaiting a heart procedure, a man in his 60s, already pale, anxious. She tried pulling up his chart. Frozen. Restarted the computer. Frozen again. A red box filled the screen. Oops, your files have been encrypted. The nurse stared at it, confused. Doctors gathered around, whispering, "What is this? Is it a virus? Is someone attacking us?" Then the realization hit them all at once. They couldn't access the patient's history. They couldn't confirm his medications. They couldn't proceed with surgery. In a single moment, technology, the thing they trusted, had become a threat. That man's procedure was postponed. Dozens more followed. And within 45 minutes, 6 major hospitals declared critical incidents. This wasn't just a cyber attack. This was a public health emergency. By midday, WannaCry had crossed oceans. FedEx went down. Renault's factories stalled to a stop. Deutsche Bahn's train departure screens blinked out. Spanish telecom giant Telefonica reported mass failures. And then, China. A nation with some of the world's heaviest firewalls found its universities collapsing under the ransomware spread. It was everywhere, every continent, except Antarctica. Cybersecurity command centers worldwide were lit up in red. Emergency meetings were called in London, Washington, Seoul, Beijing, Berlin. And still, no one knew who did it or why. But something else stood out, something too strange to ignore. WannaCry was spreading with supernatural speed. Not because of genius, not because of brilliant coding, but because it used a stolen, secret, military-grade exploit, the kind only a nation-state could build. And it hadn't been stolen from any nation-state, but from the United States of America. At the NSA's Cybersecurity Directorate in Fort Meade, Maryland, Friday mornings were usually slow. Not this time. Alarms triggered across the network. Analysts rushed to their terminals. A message began circulating through internal channels. Someone is using Eternal Blue. Silence. Shock. A creeping dread. Eternal Blue was never meant to leave the NSA. It was their exploit, a digital skeleton key capable of breaking into millions of Windows machines. It was powerful, classified, dangerous. And now it was in the wild. Not just stolen, weaponized. The room went cold. Someone had used an NSA cyber weapon to attack the world. Just 1 year earlier, a mysterious hacker group calling themselves the Shadow Brokers had begun releasing NSA tools online. At first, no one believed it. But the leaks kept coming. Sophisticated, classified, devastating tools built by American cyber engineers. One of those tools was Eternal Blue. Investigators had suspected foreign involvement from the start. Russia, China, Iran. But as WannaCry tore through global networks, a different name quietly surfaced: North Korea. A tiny, impoverished, isolated nation with one of the most aggressive hacking units on Earth. And if that theory was right, then WannaCry wasn't just ransomware. It was a message. By afternoon, IT teams around the world were fighting blind. No patch, no kill switch, no solution. Computers kept falling. Servers kept locking. Ransom notes kept spreading. And behind it all, Bitcoin wallets tied to the attackers were slowly collecting payments from terrified victims. The world was being held hostage, digitally, globally, silently. Inside the headquarters of several major cybersecurity companies, Kaspersky Lab in Moscow, Symantec in California, FireEye in Virginia, analysts were running the WannaCry sample through automated disassembly tools. Hours in, exhaustion set in. Eyes burning, coffee cups everywhere. But then one of the analysts noticed something small, barely noticeable, almost insignificant. A single chunk of code inside WannaCry that looked familiar. A sequence of commands, a formatting style, a specific pattern used in previous cyber attacks. It wasn't enough to identify a suspect, not yet, but it felt like a fingerprint. Faded, smudged, but still recognizable. The team spent hours comparing old malware to WannaCry. Then, suddenly, they found the match. It was used years earlier in a string of hacks that had brought banks to their knees, stolen millions of dollars, and penetrated Sony Pictures. And the group behind those attacks? The Lazarus Group. The elite, ultra-secret hacking arm of North Korea. And who were the Lazarus Group? Trying to understand the Lazarus Group is like trying to understand a shadow. They are everywhere and nowhere. They do not speak. They do not leak. They do not claim responsibility. They simply appear, attack, and vanish. But piecing together years of intelligence reports, cyber forensics, and defector testimonies paints a chilling picture. Lazarus is believed to be composed of some of North Korea's smartest young programmers, selected in childhood, trained in elite schools, and eventually assigned to clandestine cyber warfare bureaus inside the regime. Their mission? Fund the dictatorship, disrupt enemies, and show the world that North Korea is not to be ignored. They were behind the Sony Pictures hack in 2014, the attack that leaked executives' emails, destroyed servers, and released unreleased films, all in retaliation for a comedy movie mocking Kim Jong-un. They were behind the Bangladesh bank heist, where $81 million was stolen from the Federal Reserve in New York using a single hacked printer. And now, the fingerprints were pointing to them once again. But here's the problem. When attribution points to North Korea, things get complicated fast. Political, diplomatic, explosive. No country wants to accuse North Korea lightly, so investigators had to be absolutely certain.
They dug deeper, comparing malware samples line by line, running byte-level analysis, matching time zones, language patterns, and IP origins. Hours turned into days. Finally, multiple independent research groups agreed. WannaCry bore the unmistakable hallmarks of the Lazarus Group. Not 100% conclusive, but strong enough to point the world in one direction. Then came the next clue, the money. One of the few weaknesses in WannaCry's design was the attacker's decision to reuse a small set of Bitcoin wallets for payments. Brilliant cybercriminals, but sloppy money launderers. The wallets slowly accumulated ransom payments from victims around the world. Millions flowed in. But the funny thing about Bitcoin, it's traceable, not to identities, but to behavior patterns. People move money in predictably human ways. And when blockchain experts analyzed the movement across those wallets, they found something bizarre. The funds weren't being dispersed like a criminal syndicate would do. They weren't being held for negotiation. They weren't laundered through complicated mixers. Instead, they were being moved in small, deliberate, almost political bursts. Like a government, not a gang, was managing them. The money trail didn't prove North Korea did it, but it proved something just as important. Whoever did this did not care about getting rich. This was not a heist. It was an act of power. But the biggest question still haunted investigators. How did WannaCry spread so fast? Most ransomware spreads slowly, like contagion, email phishing, attachment downloads, human error. But WannaCry moved like radiation, instantly, invisibly, unstoppable. And that's because it used Eternal Blue, a stolen NSA exploit. The exploit had been leaked 1 year earlier by the Shadow Brokers, a mysterious group whose identity remains unknown even today. Some blamed Russia, some blamed a disgruntled insider, some blamed a rogue intelligence faction. But one thing was clear. WannaCry was built using American cyber weapons that should never have been unleashed on the world. When the NSA learned millions were being attacked using its own exploit, panic, embarrassment, internal chaos. Lawmakers demanded answers. Foreign governments demanded accountability. And inside the NSA, a chilling question began echoing in quiet hallways. Did our mistake cause this? By Monday morning, 3 days after the outbreak began, IT teams worldwide were still fighting to contain infections. The NHS remained crippled. Factories across Europe stalled. ATMs across Asia froze. Schools in China stayed closed. And cybersecurity teams were discovering something even more alarming. WannaCry had mutated. A new version had been detected, faster, more aggressive, harder to stop. And if the kill switch hadn't been found by accident 2 days earlier, the world might have witnessed something catastrophic, an uncontrollable, self-spreading digital plague, a cyber pandemic. But the kill switch only bought time. The real question lingered like smoke. Why did North Korea attack the world? What pushed a nation to deploy a global cyber weapon? And what were they planning next? Before the sun even rose over London on May 12, 2017, the damage had already begun. Not in a lab, not in some cybercriminal basement, but quietly, methodically, inside the core systems of hospitals, banks, telecom companies, airports, government agencies, and small businesses across the globe. WannaCry had left North Korea, and now it was everywhere. The world just didn't know it yet. At 7:45 a.m., a receptionist at a clinic in Manchester tapped her keyboard trying to log in to start her day. The computer lagged, then froze, then rebooted itself. She frowned. Again? But when it restarted, instead of the usual NHS login screen, she saw a black background with red text demanding $300 in Bitcoin. she wasn't alone. Doctors preparing for morning surgeries found their screens locked out. Ambulance coordinators couldn't open the dispatch system. Some hospitals reverted to pen and paper like it was 1985. Phones buzzed, staff panicked, administrators blamed local IT issues. But this wasn't local. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't a glitch. It was a global attack, already moving like a wildfire through any Windows machine that hadn't installed Microsoft's emergency patch. And the vast majority hadn't. At 11:15 a.m., an NHS cybersecurity officer in London opened his inbox and found dozens of urgent emails. Radiology down, blood test machines offline, operating theater locked out, patient records inaccessible. He rubbed his eyes. This couldn't be happening everywhere at once. But the logs confirmed. One infection, then 10, then hundreds, then thousands. The hospital network map lit up in red, each node blinking like a heartbeat racing out of control. He whispered the only conclusion possible. This is ransomware. But what kind? How widespread? And how did it get in? He didn't know it yet. But WannaCry wasn't just encrypting NHS computers. It was teaching the world a brutal lesson. When you build critical infrastructure on outdated systems, one missed update could bring an entire country to its knees. While the UK struggled, the virus broke loose in Spain, Telefonica, one of Europe's biggest telecom firms. Germany, Deutsche Bahn ticket machines went offline. Russia, Interior Ministry computers locked. China, university networks collapsed. India, banking systems hit. USA, FedEx operations disrupted. And this was only the beginning. Because unlike most ransomware, WannaCry had a secret weapon, a self-propagating engine. It didn't need phishing emails. It didn't need someone to click a file. It didn't need trickery or persuasion. It scanned the internet automatically every second, looking for vulnerable computers. If it found one, it broke in, encrypted everything, spread again, and again, and again.
This wasn't a virus. This was a digital pandemic. Across the world, the stories poured in. A heart surgeon in London, scheduled for 4 major procedures that day, now forced to cancel because patient histories were locked behind red ransomware screens. A mother in Glasgow, begging for her daughter's MRI results, delayed indefinitely because the imaging servers were frozen. A pharmacist in Madrid, unable to dispense prescriptions because the system refused to load. A university student in China watching in horror as the ransomware spread across his library's systems, locking thousands of student laptops in real time. On social media, there was chaos. My computer just went red. Why do they want Bitcoin? Is this a cyber war? Governments scrambled, tech companies scrambled, hospitals scrambled. But the virus wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. Back in March 2017, 2 months earlier, Microsoft had issued an urgent patch. They didn't say why, they didn't reveal the source, but inside the company, engineers were disturbed. The vulnerability was huge, dangerous, and far too sophisticated to be discovered by chance. Now, the world finally realized what Microsoft had discovered, but kept quiet. The exploit, Eternal Blue, came from the NSA. It wasn't made by criminals. It wasn't found by accident. It was a weapon, built, polished, and secretly deployed by the most powerful intelligence agency in the world. And it had been stolen. Now it was destroying hospitals. This wasn't just a crisis. It was a scandal. Inside Fort Meade, Maryland, alarms were ringing. Analysts stared at live feeds as red dots spread across global maps, marking WannaCry infections. "This is our exploit," one whispered. "No way," another murmured. "Eternal Blue! That's Eternal Blue!" Someone finally said the quiet part out loud.
If this gets traced back to us, they didn't even finish the sentence. Because everyone in that room understood the consequences. Governments would demand accountability. Journalists would explode with outrage. Global trust in U.S. tech oversight would collapse. Allies would question years of cooperation. And above all, people were dying because of an NSA tool. An exploit meant for espionage was now crippling ambulances, surgeries, and lab machines. The NSA had always feared their tools falling into the wrong hands, but they never imagined it would look like this. Here's the insane part. WannaCry was so badly coded that even when victims paid the ransom, the files often couldn't be decrypted. It was sloppy, buggy, chaotic. It wasn't built by elite cybercriminals trying to maximize profit. It was built by a government-backed group more interested in disruption than money. And it showed. Which raised one terrifying question. If this is what a sloppy attack looks like, what does a perfect one look like? By 3 p.m., WannaCry exploded into over 99 countries. By 6 p.m., it reached over 150 countries. Servers melted, operations froze, boards of directors panicked. IT teams gave up trying to stop it. The global economy shook. Hospitals postponed thousands of appointments, factories shut down, logistics companies stalled, universities lost years of research. This was the largest ransomware attack the world had ever seen. But even at its peak, even at the height of the chaos, WannaCry wasn't done. It had one more twist. And it would come from the least expected place. Not a spy agency, not a hacker group, not a government, but a 22-year-old cybersecurity rookie working from his bedroom in England. And he was about to do the impossible. Stop the biggest cyber attack in global history by accident. In a moment, a tiny unsolved puzzle will become the world's biggest key, and that big key will turn off the on switch. But first, for 24 hours straight, the world had been slipping into digital paralysis, and WannaCry kept spreading. Relentless, automatic, merciless. Government cybersecurity teams were overwhelmed. Tech giants were on high alert. The NSA was in quiet panic mode. But what no one knew, not intelligence agencies, not global corporations, not the world's top cybersecurity experts, was that the person who would bring this nightmare to a halt was a sleep-deprived 22-year-old rookie working from a messy bedroom in the southwest of England. His name was Marcus Hutchins, but online, he was known as Malware Tech. On the morning of May 13, 2017, Marcus wasn't thinking about world-ending cyber attacks, he was thinking about breakfast. He'd spent the most of the night monitoring suspicious malware samples, part of his routine as an analyst for a small cybersecurity firm. He planned to crash soon, maybe after a few hours of gaming or scrolling through Twitter. But then he noticed something odd. A new malware strain was tearing through the internet. It had an unusual number of infections, and it wasn't slowing down. At first he thought, another Friday worm? Whatever, happens every 3 months. But then he saw the infection map. A glowing swarm of red dots blanketing Europe, Asia, the US, a digital hurricane. This is crazy, he muttered, refreshing the feed. More dots, more infections, more frantic chatter online. Then he saw the name, WannaCry. He'd never heard of it. Nobody had. Curiosity hooked him, and it was that curiosity that would later save the world. Marcus downloaded a copy of WannaCry from an online repository where researchers were sharing samples. He opened it in a controlled environment, what cybersecurity analysts call a sandbox, a digital quarantine. Inside the code, he started exploring line by line. Then he noticed something bizarre, something that didn't belong, something that made no sense. A long, random-looking domain name. Not a command server, not a Bitcoin wallet, just a domain. Unregistered, unused. And WannaCry was programmed to ping that strange domain before executing the ransomware payload. Marcus frowned. "That's weird," he said softly. "Why check a domain that doesn't exist?" He understood the basics. Malware often checks a domain to see if it's being analyzed in a sandbox because sandboxes sometimes simulate fake responses. If the malware detects it's being studied, it shuts down. So Marcus wondered, what if WannaCry is looking for a sandbox? But what he didn't know was this. That domain wasn't a sandbox check. It was something else. Something with catastrophic power. And he was seconds from triggering it. Marcus did what he always did when he saw an unregistered domain inside malware. He bought it for $10.69. A casual purchase, a routine step, something he'd done hundreds of times. In his mind, registering the domain would simply help him track the malware's activity across the world. He updated the DNS settings, hit save, and in that instant, the entire outbreak began to slow down. At first, he didn't notice. WannaCry samples were pinging his newly registered domain like mad. Then he saw the drop. A sudden, massive reduction in new infections. He refreshed the global malware tracking panel. Numbers were declining. Graphs were flattening. He blinked, confused. Wait, what's happening? Then his phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then buzzed again.
Twitter exploded. Cybersecurity forums lit up. Someone posted, "Did WannaCry just stop?" Another, "Global infections suddenly dropping." Someone else, "Whoever registered the kill switch domain, thank you." Marcus stared at the messages. Kill switch? What kill switch? He didn't understand. Not yet. Researchers pieced it together within the hour. WannaCry had a hidden mechanism. If it could connect to the strange domain inside its code, it would shut down automatically. That domain was never meant to be active. It was a failsafe, a safety switch. The creators, whether North Korean hackers or someone else, embedded it to stop the attack if things spiraled out of control. They assumed nobody would ever register that domain. They assumed wrong. And Marcus Hutchins, 22 years old, in sweatpants, eating cereal, had just tripped the kill switch. By accident. He froze when the truth hit him. "Oh my God, I just stopped WannaCry." His hands shook. He hadn't meant to stop a global crisis. He hadn't been trying to save the NHS. He wasn't even planning to be awake that morning. But fate had other ideas. Within hours, Marcus's anonymous handle, Malware Tech, trended worldwide. News outlets scrambled to find him. Twitter crowned him a global savior. Headlines appeared. British researcher halts global cyber attack. Accidental hero stops ransomware pandemic. 22-year-old saves the internet. Governments reached out secretly. Tech executives wanted statements. Journalists begged for interviews. Everyone wanted to talk to the man who pulled the emergency brake on WannaCry. But Marcus wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because he had discovered something even more terrifying. The kill switch was temporary. It stopped the current strain, but all it would take was someone, anyone, to modify the code, remove the kill switch, and unleash it again. And the world? Still full of vulnerable machines, still unpatched, still exposed, still blind to the next wave.
Marcus tweeted a warning. This attack isn't over. A new version could start any time. And he was right. Because while the world hailed Marcus as a hero, WannaCry's creators were already working on version 2.0, a variant with no kill switch. But they were too slow, because Marcus had bought the world precious time. And another kind of hero, Microsoft, CERT teams, and thousands of cybersecurity volunteers, raced to patch the globe before the next wave hit. The world had barely caught its breath. Servers rebooted, hospitals stabilized, banks resumed transfers, airports lifted grounding orders. But somewhere in a dim, isolated control room thousands of miles away, WannaCry's creators were watching everything, unblinking, unmoved, and increasingly angry. Because while the world celebrated a sleepy British researcher, North Korea felt humiliated. And the Lazarus Group, Pyongyang's elite state-sponsored hacking unit, was not known for handling humiliation well. Not in the slightest. To understand WannaCry, you must understand its creators. The Lazarus Group wasn't just some hackers. They were a weapon, a cyber military arm of the North Korean regime, operating under orders from the Reconnaissance General Bureau, North Korea's intelligence service. They were trained mathematicians, engineers, prodigies handpicked from special schools in Pyongyang, some as young as 11 years old. Their job? To wage war without bullets. Banks, casinos, cryptocurrency exchanges, Sony Pictures, none were safe. The Lazarus Group had a reputation. If Kim Jong-un wanted something hacked, broken, stolen, or digitally obliterated, Lazarus made it happen. And in 2017, Kim Jong-un wanted money. A lot of money. Sanctions were choking North Korea's economy. Food shortages were worsening, imports were drying up. To survive, the regime needed hard currency, and Lazarus was tasked with getting it, by any means necessary. So, they built a global ransomware worm and unleashed it like a digital wildfire. What most people don't know is this. WannaCry wasn't supposed to be a world-ending virus. It was meant to be a money-making machine, a global shakedown. Tens of thousands of victims paying $300 each in Bitcoin, millions of dollars pouring into North Korean-controlled wallets. Simple, brutal, efficient. But something went wrong. Very wrong. The NSA exploit they used, Eternal Blue, was too powerful, too aggressive, too uncontrollable. The worm spread faster than they anticipated. It hit critical infrastructure they hadn't intended to destroy. It caused too much noise, too much chaos. Instead of being a stealthy ransom tool, it became a global cyber catastrophe. And what was supposed to be a quiet cash grab became front-page news. The FBI noticed, the NSA noticed, MI6, the EU Commission, Japan, South Korea, Interpol, and worst of all, Lazarus realized something terrifying. The entire world was now looking directly at them. Inside a secret operations room in Pyongyang, lit only by the soft blue glow of computer screens, a dozen Lazarus Group hackers gathered around a command console. They weren't talking. North Korean command culture didn't allow that. Instead, they watched the kill switch activation logs in stunned silence. Thousands, no, millions of bots and infected machines were still trying to reach the domain Marcus Hutchins had registered. The logs scrolled like a waterfall, every line a reminder of their mistake. Finally, the lead operator, codename Hidden Cobra, broke the silence. "We remove the switch," he said flatly. "No more shut-off." A simple command, a terrifying one, Removing the kill switch would unleash a second wave, a more violent, unstoppable, irreversible WannaCry. But it didn't matter. They were already preparing it. WannaCry 2.0, a version with no off button, a version designed to punish the world. But something delayed them. Something unexpected. A flood. Not of water, but of patches, updates, and global emergency responses. The world had reacted faster than Lazarus anticipated. Windows systems that had been vulnerable for years were suddenly being patched in hours. CERT teams around the world were burning the midnight oil. Hospitals were upgrading, banks were fortifying, ISPs were filtering traffic, governments were issuing emergency directives. The digital door Lazarus walked through so easily was closing, and it was closing fast. If they released WannaCry 2.0 now, it wouldn't land. The world was too awake, the timing was off, the opportunity lost. And for North Korea, that was unacceptable. Inside the Lazarus Group war room, a new plan was drafted. If they couldn't ransom the world, they would target the world. Focused attacks, more stealth, more sophistication, more political impact, and above all, revenge on the countries that had patched the fastest. America, the UK, Japan, South Korea. The Lazarus Group restructured itself like a military unit preparing for a second campaign. One team would focus on cryptocurrency theft, one would focus on spearphishing diplomats and embassy workers, one would infiltrate financial institutions, one would quietly begin planning for a catastrophic attack far more dangerous than WannaCry. A digital bomb. Something destructive. Something irreversible. Something cyber war scholars would later call the doomsday malware. But that story is for another episode, because right now, the world was still grappling with the fallout from WannaCry. And while intelligence agencies debated how the attack started, a more important question was now on the table. How did North Korea obtain the NSA's most dangerous cyber weapon in the first place? The answer to that question can be found in our earlier episode titled, How NSA Lost Control of Its Secret Weapons. Up next is another exciting story you don't want to miss, so hit the like button, share, and subscribe for more juicy stories.